One of the reasons why we have to remember history, especially the history of those who society or the world would like us to forget, is that we need to always understand who we are, what we're made of, what we come from. In spite of all the adversities that we've experienced throughout life for centuries, we persevered. We see that in science. We see that in our families. We see that in all of the innovative things that we've done. We see them in the present, but if we forget, we can look back and remember. In spite of all of the adversities that burden us, and sometimes we feel a thought of hopelessness, we can look back and see all that we've done to become who we are today, that we come from greatness. We need to be reminded of that, especially in times when we feel hopeless. We are great, and we will forever manifest our greatness, even in a world that would rather see us as beggars, dumb, without hope or ambition, codependent, all the negative things. We shall not forget. We will always remember those who helped bring us this far, who paved the way, who were trailblazers. We will recognize them and those who continue on with the lit torch and continue to bring us through whatever adversities we come through and we go through. We carry this torch as our superpower. It is our faith. Hope is our superpower. And we use it to navigate through what seems like sometimes hopelessness, right? We'll get through this. And we must remember our success and acknowledge those today and in the past. We must not forget, because that is our superpower. We must remember our accomplishments, and we remember we were built for this. And we will remain built for this for eternity. Maybe that is a way to start a show. I don't know. What do you think? I think so. But I'll give you a chance to marinate, and I'll be right back. Well, hello, and welcome to In Your Ear Radio. I am your host, Latoya. I know I look a little different with my cowgirl hat on. Listen, off top, let me just give all the birthday shout outs to the Pisces, because some of my favorite people are Pisces. So what's up? And this is Pisces season, just February 19th through March 20th. Pisces are just some great people. They're very creative. They're real random too. I can say that. The Pisces in my life they could be random, but they're creative. They come up with different ways. Like they could be serial entrepreneurs because of their personalities. Like they'll come up with a new way to make some money for sure. So shout out to the Pisces. But this is why I'm wearing my cowgirl hat today, because I'm celebrating my auntie's 75th birthday. And so she wanted to have a whole, I guess it's boots on the ground thing. That's the thing, right? So I don't normally wear a cowboy. This is my first cowgirl hat, actually. I have the boots. I got the cowboy boots, but this is my first hat. So just so you know how much I love you guys and how dedicated I am for showing up for those of you who show up for me. The party is starting. The party starts at 2 and goes on to the evening. And so I'm going to be a little late, but you know what I'm saying? They say it's better to be late than never, right? And so, yeah, listen, let me just get my little Bernie Mac on. We family, right? We family. You know what I'm saying? Let me sip a little tea, get my little Wendy Williams on too. My condolences to Wendy Williams, who lost her father. I think he was 94, 95. He has transitioned, gone to be with his wife, is how I like to think of it. But yeah, so we family, right? Right. So they say this thing, at least about me, about my lateness. You know what I'm saying? And I know when to be late. But I want to just say this, that my family, I know them too. Okay, they can say what they want, but they could say it starts at a certain time, but to me, I know I have a buffer for about an hour, so I know when to show up on time, and I know when not, depending on who it is. So yeah, the party might be starting, but in my mind, not quite yet. Not quite yet. If you from my culture, you understand what I'm talking about. But so I like to just think of how our role with not just showing up at the time that the invitation states is part of my African culture. You know what I'm saying? If you guys don't know, in historically and even in today's time, the African culture, they have this thing where it's more of a polychronic way of dealing with time. And polychronic is like basically where they don't necessarily have to be there. If it starts at 3 o'clock, it doesn't mean they're going to show up at 3 o'clock. They kind of just ease into it. Like they might be doing multiple things at once. So they may be around at 3, but they may be doing other things. So as I'm doing now, I'm multitasking. I'm prepared to go, but I'm also here with you. So I'm kind of like, from my ancestors, point of view, I'm more of a polychronic type of lady. You know what I'm saying? Versus a Western way of doing things, which is more monochromic. And in that respect, they like to be precise. Everything's segmented, and I know people like that with them personalities. Everything's boom, bam, boom, bam, boom. Even with this show, I can't really just script it out like this section is this section is that. I'm kind of like a go with the flow type of person. That's just my nature. And I just like to take it easy. And so I think I'm more like that. And it goes across the board when it comes to people of color. You think about it, I did the research. Even in the Caribbean, the people will say, let me see if I get my accent in. Things you won't always. Let me. No, I can't. But the things that won't always happen as quickly, as precisely as you may be accustomed to. They'll tell you that in the Caribbean. Things might not always happen as quickly or precisely as you're accustomed to. So here in the United States in this microwave era, we're more of those quick, fast people. We want things right away. You know what I'm saying? And it's just part of how we were trained to be. Okay, so it comes with this Western culture. But again, across the waters, along the coast of South Africa and on the warm beaches of the Caribbean, they take their time to do things. They say that the Africans have an emotional time consciousness, and it's more of a they groove into it. It's more of a feeling, and it's about the moment. It's not just tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. And again, even in Western Asia, in places like West Asia, more brown people, they kind of take on that same type of attitude about time. They ease into it. They ease into it. And I think about that and I see why Lauryn Hill is the way she is, because she got a lot of her ancestral DNA in her. Y'all complain about her showing up late. Listen, I went once to her concert. It was supposed to start at 8, and I don't think she came out, I want to say, until after midnight, like hours later, at least bare minimum 2 hours later. And that is her story. I mean, that is not abnormal. Anybody who's been to a Lauryn Hill concert will tell you, for the most part, most people have waited hours. So in respect, if that's your girl and you want to roll with her, that the time's going to say 8 o'clock on a ticket. And also that your babysitter doesn't need to be at your house until maybe 9:30, 10, because that'll give you time to get there when she comes on at 11 or whenever. So I think Lauryn Hill has the same kind of attitude per se when it comes to time as our ancestors on the continent of Africa. You know what I'm saying? So I think about it that way. That, and I'm glad to know that, like, the things that are in me, not necessarily on me, but are in me, are natural. They're ancestral. It's part of my DNA, how I show up. And so I appreciate that so much. Now I know when to be on time. Don't get me wrong. I do know when to show up and be on time. Like you paying me. Of course, I'm gonna pull up when we agree, when I'm getting paid from this time to this time. Of course, I'm gonna show up on time. Or if it's a surprise party, like, you want to be there before the guest arrives, to be there with everybody else, to say surprise. And then, with other commitments, you have doctor's appointments and things like that. When I go get my nails done or my hair, I show up on time. things like that. But when it's just casual leisure things, parties, events, unless I'm trying to see, like if it's a fight or something and I want to see a certain event, then of course I have to be on time. But one of the things I've learned too, back in the day working with my father and my uncles who had a commercial plumbing business, I learned this term, time is of the essence. And so for those of you who may not know what that means, it's a Western cultural way of thinking, right? And it's, you associate that with different things, but time is of the essence. So again, I know when to pull up. I know when to be on time. And one of the things that was always pushed to me, shout out to my uncle who would say, time is of the essence, because we would have to bid on projects, and the project ain't gonna wait for you to submit your bid. They say you submit your bid at this time, you submit your bid at this time. And then once you commit to that and you tell them you can have this project done within a certain amount of time, they expect you to do that. And if you go over that time, then you're charged more money because you didn't, stick to your original commitment under your bid. So it ends up costing you more than what you bidded. It costs the company more now, or maybe you have to eat it. But the bottom line is time is of the essence. So time is relative, but it just depends on what it is for me. I hope y'all like my hat. I'm trying to, acclimate to it and let it grow on me a little bit. But so I get it. But there's a documentary, I haven't watched it yet, but I'm interested in checking it out, that also talks about time. It's a Nigerian American filmmaker, and I'm going to butcher his name, but I'll try my best. It's Chinjindu Kelechi Eke, and he explores a topic as a cultural rift through his film, talking about African time. So maybe you guys can check that out. Again, it's called African Time, a Nigerian American filmmaker, Chinjindu Kelechi Eke. And I'm going to check it out because I need to understand me more. Okay. Anyways, I really, really appreciate you guys for joining me live today. Again, your presence is my present. I know I say this, but I'm seriously saying it now because I do have a current engagement that I do want to be present for as well. So I'm going to go through some things and, we won't be here for 90 minutes for sure. We won't be here for 90 minutes, less than 90 minutes for sure. And so I just wanted to go over some topics, some things that have happened during the week that we haven't talked. We haven't talked since last Saturday. So I just want to chop it up with you right quick, if you don't mind. And thank you again on Facebook and YouTube. If you want to add to the conversation, feel free to do so. Thank you, GB, for being live in the chat, giving me them laughing emojis, because you know me, don't you? But like I said, in all seriousness, I know when to be on time. I know to be on time when my firstborn brother is escorting me. Okay, that's another thing I know to be on time for. Okay. But anyways, how did you guys do for President's Day? Does anybody celebrate that? I know a lot of us who have what we call real jobs, and I say that because with a real job, you actually get paid for time off. You get sick leave. You get paid for holidays. When federal holidays fill up, you can sit at home and chill and enjoy your family life and still, not miss a beat as far as income is concerned, which is a important thing. And I think that should be the culture here across the board for anybody who's out there working, because we work to eat, so there's enough money out there to pay people to have a day off, to break bread, especially if y'all want us to celebrate President's Day. Y'all came up with these federal holidays. So if you want us to celebrate it, be joyous and festive and all of that, pay people so they don't have to think about the money that they're missing, because people got light bills, they got stuff to do, they got things to pay, they got, what I'm saying? So anyways, President's Day was last week. Monday was a day off for some of us with pay, and for others maybe not, or maybe you got time and a half, or, maybe you retired, I don't know. Anyways, but if you don't know, President's Day is crazy because, I mentioned it to my sweetie. I'm like, yeah, it's President's Day. And he's like, I ain't celebrating. And yeah, we don't celebrate any president, really, do we? Anybody? I mean, across the board, regardless of what your political interests are, does anybody actually go out on a Monday and do any festivities celebrating George Washington, which is the actual reason why we have President's Day? George Washington, our first president. He was, they established this day after his death. I want to say he died in, 1799. So he established this day around his birthday, which was February 22nd, to remember him and to honor him as a national day of remembrance. And so then it went on from there to where Congress later on included it as a federal holiday. But in between time, what caused it to become President's Day and not just celebrating George Washington is because they included Abraham Lincoln, whose birthday fell around the 12th of February. And so they wanted to throw him in too. Quite some significant presidents, I say. For example, George Washington being the first president, I think that's a big deal. And then, of course, you have Abraham Lincoln, who we were taught freed the enslaved, which is not necessarily true. If you consider that the reason why the enslaved were freed, those who were, because they weren't all freed at that time, were the ones that agreed to fight the Civil War that the U.S. was losing against their own citizens in the Confederacy. So when Black people got involved, it got lit. You know what I'm saying? And once it got lit and they were able to maintain the United States as they would have it, it caused the freedom of those who were enslaved, who fought in that war. So, and again, it wasn't all of us. But yeah, so even the mockery of it all, right? When I think about George Washington and I think about what he stood for in comparison to what I was taught, it's just really crazy. And it always brings me back to the thought of when I heard someone saying, I can't remember the exact person right now from quoting, I will say, I think it was Malcolm X, who said that the Europeans, the Jewish people would not allow the Nazis to educate their kids. So thereafter, once we were, those who were enslaved here in the United States, who stayed here under this institution, we did allow our children to go into institutions that taught us white history, white culture, and just whatever they wanted us to know. Going back to the point of why you wouldn't let a Nazi teach the Jewish people. We know the history, or, just in general, what the Nazis represented and what they did, slaughtering a lot of Jewish people in Europe. And so why would you allow them people to teach them anything? They don't have any good intentions. But okay, you know what I'm saying? Here we are in America, we did allow that. And so we learned that George Washington was this great man who could not tell a lie, and that he had these wooden teeth and all of the great things about him. What we didn't know is that upon his death, he had 317 enslaved people. He had actually owned 300. Let me get that correct, because it wasn't exactly that number. He died in Mount Vernon, which is where he was born. And in Mount Vernon, at the time of his death, again, 1799, there were 317 enslaved people. That number quadrupled later on. But he himself had 123. He owned 123 people at the time of his death. And you don't hear that story. I don't remember being taught that he owned enslaved people. And then when he married a woman who happened to be a widow, who acquired her husband's wealth, which happened to be enslaved people, 153 of the Custis estate, 153 humans of the Custis estate, then that number multiplied, right? And so we don't hear that story. We don't hear the stories of the celebratory acts that were done for the first president of the United States, where they actually mimicked Black people in blackface and didn't respect us. But instead, in school, still, we were taught that he was an honorable man, and we have a day set aside to celebrate him. And people wonder why we feel away, Yeah, we feel away, because when we know the truth, it's like, really? Like, would you be celebrating someone who took your loved one into captivity forever for the duration of their life and forced them to be your bed buddy, your, what do they call it? Yeah, your bed buddy. And I'm just using a light term, and work for you without pay? I mean, would you be celebrating that on a Monday? Would you be barbecuing? Would you not be giving the history and telling your kids what it really is? And the interesting thing about it is, we don't talk about these stories enough and tell the truth. And I think, they say it'll make certain people feel bad. You should feel bad. If you're a human and you have emotions, which we have hundreds, I think even thousands of emotions that we go through probably on a daily basis. Some of them we recognize, some of them we may not recognize. But if you're a human being, you should feel a way, because you know that that's not right. So it's okay to feel bad about it. But then knowing and understanding that you should want to be a better person and change that, and offer retribution to those who have been, affected by that. Because those who exist today, the descendants of those who were enslaved here in the United States, have been affected. We're still being affected. I mean, there's, science teaches us, psychology teaches us, I should say, that we deal with a lot of trauma emotionally. A lot of the things that we experience emotionally have a lot to do with just the things that we've carried over, by way of racism and oppression and all of those things. But there's joy. There is still joy. But yeah, George Washington, yeah, his whole legacy was built on enslaving people. And again, we were told he had wooden teeth, but the reality is he took the teeth of enslaved people and put them in his mouth. It wasn't wood. It was actual teeth, the bone of another person who happened to be enslaved and owned by him, maybe, because I don't know if they, borrowed from other enslaved people, which they did. They did a lot of wrenching out of enslaved people as well. So yeah, it's just weird. When we think about the holidays are set in place that, for us to have respect and remembrance, and we know that it's particularly for a certain group of people. But then you have to even look at those people sideways, wondering, do they know the truth? And if they know the truth, do they still think it's cause for celebration? And then how are you going to feel about them after that? You know what I mean? So yeah, it was really crazy when I think about it too, because he did agree to, well, it says it in his will, and again, it's George Washington, the first president of the United States, again, why we celebrate President's Day, put in his will to free those who were enslaved upon his wife's death, again, acquiring her wealth as well of people. And she decided against that. Upon her death, her wealth was, they went and put that back under her widow's estate and handed off those who were enslaved under the marriage with her and George Washington to the grandkids. Okay, so they wasn't ready to let go of that wealth. They could not let go of that wealth. But anyways, that was President's Day, right? So yeah, and then of course now we have what? We got a lot going on, y'all. We have Chinese New Year. We have also Ramadan and Lent. Lent and Ramadan are actually starting on the same day, which is crazy. I always talk about this every year because, we hear people feuding about religion, something I don't really get into, partake in. I'm a spiritual person. I definitely love and believe in God, and there's something definitely greater than my human self. But I don't get into religion because a lot of it is tied into man-made structures, and I'm just not I don't trust man like that. Not too many people I would allow to lead me. But anyways, with Chinese New Year, it just, the symbolism for me is that it all happens around the same time, even though these people are different from different parts of the earth, maybe different parts of the world, have different cultures, different beliefs. They kind of come together under the same understanding and under the same instructions with different ways of living. So with the Chinese New Year that started just on the 17th of February, it's the year of the fire horse. So in Chinese, they look at, I think I'm the year of the rabbit because it's based on what year you were born, the animal represents, and I think I'm the rabbit. Give me my rabbit. Y'all remember that on colors? Give me my rabbit. So anyway, this is the year of the fire horse. And it symbolizes freedom, energy, and independence, while, fire elements adds passion and dynamism. It's like a forward momentum, they say, when it comes to fire, I guess. And then the horse is believed to welcome in adventure and spiritedness and optimism. Okay, that's what it's all about. So they celebrate it, and that's what it is. And it's celebrated in February due to the lunar solar calendar. Again, a lot of people, especially within the Christian beliefs, don't believe in like the sun and the moon and how those things are attributed to who we are as a people. I don't know how you can exclude those things that were here before us and are the cause of our existence, be it a plant, be it a tree, be it the particular grass that grows in a particular region. I definitely think that the sun, moon, and stars definitely affect who we are and what we are, what energy is brought up in us. And again, that's across the board for all living things. But anyways, yeah, so it's attributed to a lunar solar calendar used in China. And the calendar is based on movements of the moon and celestial bodies, which is why, the celebration occurs in February. And the lunar year marks the beginning of a new year on a traditional Chinese lunar solar calendar. And it is a time to honor the deities and ancestors, okay? And as well as feast and visit family members. The family activities include cleaning and decorating houses with red items. I like red. Okay, you see, I like red. Yeah, so I'm kind of being festive, I suppose. It offered sacrifices to the ancestors. When I read that, I thought, some people would take that a certain kind of way, like they out here taking humans and doing some strange things. And to me, a sacrifice could be some of the things that are done during the Chinese New Year, during Ramadan and Lent. One of the sacrifices is, for example, in Lent, some people exclude sugar. Whatever your vice may be, something that you struggle to not do, something that you're habitual about, you decide to give that up, knowing that it's going to be a struggle and that you're going to go through some type of emotions that you could avoid if you just continue to do those things. So that is kind of sacrificial. So it's not necessarily taking a life or animal or doing things like that. It could be as simple as not eating sugar, not drinking, abstaining from sex, whatever your vice may be. I don't know. And so that's one of the things they do. They offer sacrifice. They again participate in different celebrations influenced by the Chinese zodiac, and it's every year. Every year, it's a different animal, of course, because the animal is represented by the year. Ramadan and Lent, again, they started on the same day. With Ramadan, it's based on when the crescent moon appears, the new crescent moon, and with Lent, it's about the same thing. So with Lent, if I remember correctly, it follows the 40 days before, up until the sacrifice or the crucifixion of Jesus. So 40 days before that happens is how that is represented. But in Ramadan, which is a Muslim religion, when the new crescent moon comes out for 29 or 30 days, it's considered the holiest month. And again, all over the world, Muslims unite in a ritual of daily fasting from dawn to sunset. That means no water. You can't even chew bubble gum, y'all. So that is their sacrifice, right? They don't eat anything, they don't drink anything until the sun cracks, until dawn. And because it's a holy month. And for Muslims, it's a time for increased worship, religious reflection, and charity. Socially, it often brings family and friends together in festive gatherings around meals to break their fast. The start of the month traditionally depends, again, on sighting of the crescent moon. There are 5 pillars of the Ramadan or the Islamic Muslim religion. And again, I mentioned one, which is fasting, but there's also, they focus on their faith, which I would say is definitely embedded in fasting, right? Because I know how it is to be hungry. And I don't mean like hungry, like you can't afford to eat, but just your stomach growling and you got food, you have access to food and you just decide you're not going to eat. That takes a lot of willpower and sacrifice and faith that you'll be all right. You'll make it through. So that's one thing, faith. And then they pray. So they make salat, which is prayer. They make prayer 5 times a day, which I think is beautiful. You go to actual predominantly Islamic country, that is part of their culture, where they could be out at the mall, and when that bell rings or whatever sound comes out, they stop what they're doing as a people and they stop and pray. What could be wrong with that? I do that in my day-to-day life. I don't have a number, but I use, like, when I say 11:11 as my reminder to stop and thank God. Sometimes I pray for a long time, and I pray for everybody at once, or I do a blanket prayer where I just say, thank you, God, and show gratitude. But whatever it is, I stop and acknowledge God, because it's something about having gratitude and showing gratitude to something greater than yourself that kind of fills your cup and it builds you up and it fortifies you. And so nothing negative happens when I stop and thank God, is what I'm saying. And so I think that's a great thing that they do. Faith, what I say, prayer. There's also they have a pilgrimage too. So at least once as a Muslim, you should go to Mecca, and so they do that. But there's fasting and charity and things of that nature. So all these positive things, they're looking out for those who are in need. They're sacrificing themselves, and part of fasting helps you to be a stronger person, right? It builds your strength. It helps you because you never know when you're going to be in a time where you won't have access to food. If you're fighting, if you're out here protesting, you're fighting for your freedom, you're fighting for your democracy, you may not have access to food. If there's a nuclear bomb, and I know I'm going real dark, but something crazy could happen and you won't have access to food. But along the line, you have trained yourself for 30 days max to go without, at least for hours at a time, until sundown. And that's important, especially as I explained, where I probably eat every 2 to 4 hours something. So it's a good way to train your body as well to be prepared when you must fight. And that's just part of, I think, existing on earth. So yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing. And then again, they follow some of the same rituals. Of course, fasting and sacrificing. Again, they decide what they're going to abstain from, and it's a big thing. And for them, it's 40 days, and it's the day leading up to again the crucifixion, Easter, the crucifixion of Jesus, and it symbolizes 40 symbolizes some biblical things that happened. You think about Moses, again, Jesus, who also there was a what was the other guy? Elijah. Um, People who maybe fasted for 40 days, including Jesus, or people who were enslaved for 40 days. And so that number represents that. And so that's cool. And then you have, Carnival and Mardi Gras. They falls along that Lent. And so Mardi Gras is just to get you geared up. So right before you do Lent, it's turn up. That's what that's all about. That Mardi Gras and that carnival and that festival. It's deeper than that. It's ancestral. It goes back to the continent. It's a little more global than we know it, but it's rooted in New Orleans here in the States as far as the tradition as we know it. And in mathematics, which is something that I studied in my younger years, um, 40 equals 4, 4 plus 0 equals 4, and 4 in mathematics equals culture. And so I just put all this together and I said, yeah, we are of this, of a culture. And we know what culture is. It's a way of life. It's a way of living. It's the way that we do things. It's the food we eat, the music we listen to, the way we dress, our beliefs, our religions, how we do it. And so it's just ironic. 40 days, the whole thing that most of these religions fall in line with their rituals in some way or respect. So I think it's a beautiful thing. But I just want to spend some time. And again, I said we wouldn't be here long. So I want to dedicate the remaining of the time that we spend together to acknowledging one of the greats that we lost. Can I say lost? I mean, 84 is young to me. So I don't want to say lost, but still, gone too soon, but not here in the physical form, And I just want to pay my respects to Mr. Jesse Jackson, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Sr., who transitioned on the day of Huey P. Newton's birthday. If you guys did not know, February 17th, 1942, Huey P. Newton was born. And as stated, on the 17th of this year in February, Jesse Jackson Sr. transitioned. I was just thinking about the condition that he was in. It was some form of Parkinson's. I don't remember the exact name. But he lived, I want to say at least a decade with this condition. And then, yeah, he's gone. But I want to pay my respects to him because I never, I remember him from the 80s. I know what I know about him, but he didn't get the kind of recognition that a lot of our great leaders, especially in the civil rights era, and all of them are leaving us. You guys are going on to be with the Lord. But he didn't get the recognition. He was phenomenal. If you think about his history. And so I just want to just touch on some things. I can't touch on everything, of course, but and I'm sure there's much I still don't know about him. But I wanted to just dedicate this time that I'm spending, this brief time we're going to share together, with just acknowledging his existence and his contribution to society. I don't think we do enough of that. And I think it's heartbreaking when we think about how in today's time, when we have conversations with people who are not civically engaged or who are not, focused on social justice issues and things that affect us as a whole, they're kind of just detached from it. And when you bring up things as simple as, voting, how voting is so important, you say things like people die for your right to vote. And that's just like a cliche term to some people. Like they don't even look at it like that's an old way of thinking. And I'm thinking, no, it's not. Because people really did die. Like really, really, they did. Like they really went out, left their babies at home and their wives at home or vice versa, husbands and their babies at home, and went and gathered up people that they knew and strangers to register to vote. That's how important it was to them, considering that, you know, terrorist organizations like the Ku Klux Klan were formulated around the fact that Black people were allowed to vote. And so they would be terrorized. People were scared to show up to vote. And so you had people who put an S on their chest and pulled up and stood, you know, in the middle and said, hey, I'm going to help you. You know, I know that they're trying to intimidate you. They're putting crosses in your yard. They're threatening your family. They're spitting on you. They're doing all of these negative things to discourage you from voting. But I am here. I am here as a soldier in this battle to help us get, you know, in a position of power. And voting is a position of power. Democracy is powerful, and it's important that we maintain it. And I think about Jesse Jackson and just learning so much more of all the things he's done, because in my mind, I think about him as keep hope alive. And all of his great speeches, I kind of get tickled because of the way that he talks, his vernacular. You know, I kind of joke about that because I know I'm silly. I'm a boss, something to laugh about. But just, you know, I was listening to people throughout the week that were calling in to some of my favorite podcasts and radio shows and just talking about their experiences. And they were all positive. I'm like, you know, a lot of people were touched and moved by him. You know, there was even a time where he was doing a speech somewhere. I don't know if it was for the Rainbow Coalition or for a DNC speech, because he ran for president twice in 84 and 88. And I'll get into that too. But where they said they were present when he was on stage, a man who had not yet succumbed to his illness and you know, was confined to a wheelchair, saw other people in the audience that were differently able in wheelchairs. And he said one of the guys that was telling the story said there was a man in the audience in a wheelchair and he had his head down, and Jesse Jackson was on stage speaking, and he singled him out. And he said, why you got your head down? You hold your head up. And he went over there and started pushing this man around. I'm getting choked up even thinking about it, because I could imagine the feeling that man must have felt knowing that somebody saw him. You know what I'm saying? Because we see that a lot in life. You know, I've heard people who are maybe more heavy set than normal say that they don't feel seen. Men don't hold doors for them like they would for someone who may be like a figure 8. And the same for people who are differently able. Like sometimes you have kind people, we go out of our way to help people who might be on a crutches or wheelchair, but they're not recognized. Maybe we don't speak to them. And to see this man on stage, maybe not even knowing that he too would be in that position. He probably had no idea that he would, you know, have this disease that would debilitate him. Recognized this man, acknowledged him, told him, hold your head up, went down and pushed him around and made him part of whatever experience they were having at that time. And the guy was explaining, he saw how the man's joy, how his face lit up and his shoulders went back, and it just made a difference in his day. Just something so simple as that. And I just thought that was so beautiful, and God bless him for that. You know, that's the one thing he did in life. He changed somebody. He affected somebody in the most positive way. And if, you know, my journalistic mind, I would like to go back and do like an Oprah Winfrey, where are they now? Where whoever does that show or did that show, and find out, you know, what was his experience if he's still around, and how did that affect him? And I think about those things where people were saying how he would come to, you know, these events or come to schools with the I am somebody speech, and it didn't matter if it was brown, yellow, Puerto Rican, or Asian. That's a song, ain't I? Like I'm brown, Puerto Rican. Anyway, it didn't matter the race. He would let you all know that you are all somebody, no matter what you're experiencing, no matter what your adversity is, no matter what you were born into, no matter what you come from, you matter, you are somebody. And, you know, we think about that now. Do we have leaders like that? We may have some, but do we really have people who we consider politicians? You know, arguably some would say that he wasn't a politician. Again, the late great Reverend Jesse Jackson, and some would say he was, because he did sit in a seat, like a ghost seat as a Senate. And again, like I said, he ran for president twice. But was he a politician? Not exactly. I wouldn't say so. I think his main focus was on, you know, being a member of the Rainbow Coalition, was equal rights for all people being able to have food, clothing, and shelter, security, just being treated as a human being. But he affected people in a positive way. He was so motivational. He, you know, keep hope alive. We can't give up this fight. And that's something that we have to remember, because a lot of people, even during this, and I know some people don't think it's as serious as it is, and some of us know it is. We knew that before we got to where we're at. This is happening in real time, and a lot of us aren't being affected yet, so we don't really understand how serious it is. But he talks about keeping hope alive and how you just have to continue to fight. And you may not win every battle, but that doesn't mean you give up. Those who came before us, had they given up, where would we be right now? You know what I mean? So I just love everything about him. He was the protege of the Dr. Martin Luther King. You guys know that famous photo where he was standing on the actual balcony where Dr. Martin Luther King was succumb to his death. He was standing next to him at that time as a young man. And how did that affect him? You go around the world fighting just to get people registered to vote, to get civil rights for the world. He could have just stayed home and mind his business and drank his water and been with his lady and his kids. I think it was 6 kids he had. How many children? Yeah, 6 children. And he could have just minded his business, but he knew how important it was, how important democracy is, and how important it is for us as a people to be free, to have the power, not to be ruled over. We don't want kings. We don't want queens. We want people who we trust and respect, because we all want a leader. You hear people say to them, we don't have leaders like Malcolm X. We don't have leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King. We do have leaders, but we all want a leader, but we want a leader that we can trust. We want a leader that we can respect, because everybody is not a leader, but some people truly and really are. And if they have what it takes and are willing to put their lives on the line and sacrifice their well-being, their happiness with their families, for the whole, for everybody, you gotta salute that person. And Jesse Jackson, I think, deserves a salute. Okay. He did something that no other president can do, because globally, good people are in leadership globally. You can listen to the story that people tell you. If I use an example, talking about Gaddafi and his son, and they'll tell you all of these negative things about them as being bad leaders or cruel to the people. And who's to say that's not true? Who's to say it's true? But there's another side to that story too. Some people will say good things. When you think about Fidel Castro, people will say positive things about him. But if we listen to the American story, we're going to hear that he was a hardcore and he was not a good person. And these people were just trying not to be under the rule or the dictatorship of a country that wanted to rule over them. As of now, Cuba's being starved out, y'all. They can't even get gas. They stole the president from Venezuela, and their other ally in Mexico is not giving them gas. And America is saying, if anybody gives them gas, and I ain't talking about Roberto's on Wednesday's tacos. Okay, I'm talking about fuel, like, okay. But if anybody gives them gas, they're going to put embargoes on them. And that's just a sidebar conversation. But my heart goes out to the people in Cuba, because we don't see any information about that. But people who put their lives on the line, presidents couldn't even do this. And Jesse Jackson, the Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr., was able to do so much. His influence extended to international matters in the 80s and the 90s. And in 1983, he traveled to Syria to secure the release of a captured American pilot, Navy, Lieutenant Robert Goodman, who was being held by the Syrian government. Goodman had been shot down over Lebanon while on mission to bomb Syrian positions in the country. And after Jesse Jackson made a dramatic personal appeal to the president, Hafez al-Assad, Goodman was released. So he has a history of freeing hostages. In June of 1984, not as president, not as president-elect, not as senator, not as a congressman, not as a politician, as a man, a free man who just wanted to see people live in peace, okay? And in June of 1984, Jackson negotiated the release of 22 Americans being held in Cuba after an invitation by the Cuban president, Fidel Castro. On the eve of 1991, the Persian Gulf War, Jackson made a trip to Iraq to plead with Saddam Hussein. So this is another incident. I'm giving you, this is number 3 now. To plead with Saddam Hussein for the release of foreign nationals held there as human shields, securing the release of several British and 20 American individuals. This is some man who did not have the U.S. wealth. He wasn't the leader of the free world. He was just a man. He was just a man. But these people respected him. They respected him as a what I would say is a what is the word I'm looking for? A good man. I'll just say that, a good man, which is what y'all's president references as. He was a good man. But what other word am I looking for? There's another word that I want to say, but it'll come to me. But he also, as I continue on with all of the greatness that he did in the time allotted to him in the 84 years that he had to do what he had to do before he was called back, Jackson was an outspoken advocate for the end of the racial apartheid regime in South Africa, lobbying Pope John Paul II and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev against the South African government. Jackson accompanied anti-apartheid leader and future president Nelson Mandela. Y'all remember that? That man was locked up for like 27 years and became the president. Anything is possible, y'all. Don't give up. Anything is possible, but it requires strategy. It requires fight. It requires wisdom. It requires trust. It requires you to allow yourself to be led by people who know what the hell they're talking about. But yeah, he went along with the Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev against the South African government, and also with the future president Nelson Mandela. And on Mandela's release from his long imprisonment in South Africa, okay, in 1997, Jackson traveled to Kenya to meet with Kenyan President Daniel Arap and fair elections. So he was there to fight to promote fair elections. Again, that was his calling. That is what he did, not under any title except Reverend. And I heard shout out to Lamont King. I was listening to Urban View Mornings early in the week, and he was like, yeah, he was a reverend, but he never had a church. I just thought that was funny. And then it made me think, do you need to have a church to be a reverend? Anyway, another sidebar conversation, right? But yeah, so he went to Kenya, promoting free and fair elections, even, outside of the United States, for the people. This was global. This was worldly. Also, in the United States, under President Bill Clinton's special envoy for democracy to promote free and fair elections. That's what that was all about. So he went to Kenya this is under Bill Clinton's presidency. So under different presidents, he's done so many different things. And this is all about the people, freedom, and having the power. We can have leadership, but we still want the power for that person that leads us, right? So in April of 1999, during the Kosovo War, some of you remember that who were around, and the NATO bombing of Yugoslavia, he traveled to Belgrade to negotiate the release of 3 U.S. POWs captured on the Macedonian border, while patrolling the UN peacekeeping unit. Not the president, not any ambassador, not any Senate, not Congress, not any politician, not any wealthy man or woman. Jesse Jackson did this. So he went there and negotiated the release of, again, the U.S. POWs captured in the Macedonian border while patrolling the UN peacekeeping unit. He did this along with suburban American Congressman Rod Blagojevich. I'm not familiar with him. And he met with then. So he did take somebody with him that was part of representation of the United States in the House. And he met then with the Yugoslavian president, Slobodan Milosevic, who later agreed to release the 3 men. Look at all this. All of these people, should be kissing his feet. This is beautiful. This is great. This is what he did in his time, in his 84 years of existence here on the planet Earth. Jackson's negotiation was not sanctioned by the Clinton administration. He did this on his own. So how was he, just as a reverend? You know what I'm saying? I didn't go back and get all of his education in that respect, but just as a reverend, he was able to make these negotiations with world leaders to bring people who were hostages, back. One of the things I was listening to too, when I was listening to the Clay Kane show, he played an old interview that he did with the Mr. Reverend Jesse Jackson. And he talked about the fact that he did run for president in 1984 and then again in 1988. And then he did not get past the primaries, but he did. He tried, right? And I remember that. I wasn't old enough to vote. I think I was young. Okay, I was young. Anyway. But yeah, so Clay Kane asked him, you ran in 84, you ran in 88. Why didn't you run again? And his response again kind of choked me up. He said, he was more focused on voter registration. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? And I say all of this because there are so many people who downplay voting. I know we got a lot of fake people in these positions, and they make it really hard to have hope and have faith and to have trust and to even believe that we can get through this. But they're there doing their job, which is to suppress us, to make us feel like we should not have the right to have the power over the people who we put in those positions. And then once we put them in a position, they use our tax dollars to distribute for resources, however which way they want. But that's the whole point, for us to be apathetic. And this man, imagine what it entails to be the president, thought it was more important to focus on voter registration. That's what he said, y'all. That made me feel a way like we have a lot of us, and I'm not, y'all know I'm probably preaching to the choir, but for those who feel a way about voting and are not engaged and don't think it's important, or their religion teaches them not to be engaged, meanwhile they still getting federal taxes taken out of their check, and they paying taxes, and they, when they go buy a beer or whatever they go buy, they being taxed, but you don't vote because your religion teaches you not to vote, or da 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 da. Whatever your reason may be, look how important it is, how it was so important to this man who had freed hostages, who had traveled globally and spoke to world leaders and done so many phenomenal things that none of us could never dream of doing in our lifetime. We all have our purpose. You know what I'm saying? Not all of us supposed to be going freeing hostages. Some of us have a simple job as to give birth to the next leader of the free world. That's just a simple job we need to do. Just had a baby. Even if we don't keep it, we give it up for adoption. Some of us just have simple jobs. Some of us, it sounds simple, but everybody's purpose is different. So I'm not saying that this is what you need to do to be recognized, but considering what he did, what he was of service to the world, to the people, to humanity, and he didn't just speak about it, he lived it. And I just thought that was just really, really deep for him to even do that. Being part of the Rainbow Push was a big deal, right? I know I said we're going to do this less than 90 minutes, so I'm doing my best. I get so excited about the information that I'm sharing. Forgive me. I hope you guys are enjoying it, though. I am. But even in Rainbow Push, the mission and goals in Rainbow Push, if you guys aren't familiar with Rainbow Push, is where he will be laid in state, meaning you can go and view his body and, remember him under the Rainbow Push, wherever they have their facilities or whatnot as well. But being a part of Rainbow Push, it's a Rainbow Push coalition. What they do, they advocate for social change and civil rights by promoting economic and educational opportunities for all individuals, particularly marginalized communities. The organization aims to protect and defend civil rights, level the economic playing field, promote peace and justice globally. And some of the ways in which they do that, their activities and impact are through voter registration. They organize and have registered hundreds of thousands of voters and played a significant role in electing public officials. That's important, you guys. Yeah, we don't always have the right people in those positions, but under their leadership, such as this, under the Rainbow Coalition, and people who are of service, they can help us get those people in those positions. Advocacy, okay, that's another thing they do. So they address issues such as fair housing, affirmative action, gender equality, and environmental protections. Okay, the Rainbow Coalition, which the Reverend Jesse Jackson was a part of, led. They also have activities and impact in corporate accountability. So they work to ensure that corporations adopt affirmative action programs and hire more minority executives. So, we live in a world where people will tell you that America isn't racist, but we actually had to have amendments in place so that Black people could work, could eat, could have jobs with livable wages, because they were being looked over. I'm going to give you another history fact. As I mentioned earlier, my father and my uncles, for many, many years, they had a commercial contracting company. They didn't got up there in age, and so they good. They're retired now, but they had a commercial plumbing company. And for many, many years, lots of people in our family and outside of our family of different creeds, different shades, white, Black, or otherwise, benefited being able to have jobs. If you're coming out of the system and nobody wants to hire you, you could go there and make a livable wage. But one of the things I always remembered was because I used to help with the processing of bids, which means if you made a proposal to companies, we'll do your plumbing, your commercial, we'll help you build this building for this price. And whoever got it right, who got it where the lowest, whoever got the lowest bid would be awarded that. Well, with this commercial plumbing company, the only way that they could really get big jobs. So my family is notable for a lot of fire stations here in Las Vegas and schools, Clark County schools, and any state or county building. They've, been able to contribute to the construction of it, because in those particular businesses, they have to follow the rule of fairness, affirmative action. So you can't just look at somebody and say, no, he black, I'm not going to give him the job. There's no good old boy system. It's based on numbers. So you look at those numbers, you don't look at the color, and you say, this person has the lowest bid. And so that's how they got those jobs. So that's just one of the ways I'm saying that affirmative action and DEI has benefited my family and many other people who have, been able to come in and work and make money and a livable wage. Outside of that, in private sectors, they didn't do a lot of private jobs like a 7-Eleven or someone who had a private community business or something that wasn't federal, or, county or state, because those people could just look at your skin and decide not to take it. They didn't have to go by the lowest bid. And so that's why these things were important and had to be implemented, because, they were trying to starve us out like they were doing it, people in Cuba right now. You know what I'm saying? They can't even get gas. And again, I ain't talking about Roberto's, not Roberto's on Wednesdays. And the tacos like $1 something. Yeah. They're like $3 something normally. But anyway, but Jesse Jackson did a lot of great things. And again, the Rainbow Coalition, as I outlined, were a lot of the things. He even he fought for equal wages for women. I was reading a quote where he said that, how do you justify paying women less than you pay men? And this is like across the board. White men get paid more than other men, and then women in general get paid less than those other men, and of course, white men. And so one of the quotes he said is, bread and eggs ain't cheaper, so why are they getting paid 60 cents on a dollar? So make it make sense. You paying them less for the same job, but they're not paying less for bread and eggs. You know what I'm saying? So he fought for us in that way as well. He fought for the LGBTQ community. He was one of the first people in the political realm that actually spoke out for equality for the LGBTQ community. So that's one of the great things he did. He recognized those people as well. And initially the way that he lost in the 1988 election was his association. Well, he said it's anti-Semitic word. He used an anti-Semitic word, and I won't repeat it, referring to Jews in a derogatory way, because I don't know if it's appropriate to repeat it, and I'm respectful of not disrespecting people unnecessarily. But they used that and went all over. I mean, that was enough. And we've seen that even with Barack Obama. He had to disassociate himself from the Reverend, was it Barber? I can't remember his name, but he had to disassociate him because that Reverend was pro-black, and he was about that life, but he wasn't hateful. He wasn't using hate speech. It was just the fact that he uplifted the black community. And with Barack Obama, he had to denounce Farrakhan, Minister Louis Farrakhan. And so they do those kind of things in to black people. They make it very difficult for us to navigate through. Meanwhile, we have a president who will tell you on any given day, ending in Y, that he can grab stars by the coochie. He's associated in the Epstein files. He may be associated with rape. He's had charges of rape, even with a 13-year-old. He has 34 felony counts. The list is long. And I'm just bringing that up just to mention the racism. Okay, the racism. Let's just put it out there. So I heard so many inspiring stories, and then what really got me and threw me off was, it's always a monkey wrench in there, right? So somebody calls into one of the shows and says, well, how did he get his wealth? Now, they done went over all these things. Imagine, I'm sure they talked about way more of his accomplishments than I have in this time that we've spent together. But imagine you've been just talking about all the great things this man did in his life and time in the 84 years allotted to him. And you get somebody calling in that says, well, how did he get his wealth? Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, they died poor. Malcolm X did not have the support of the FOI, the Nation of Islam, when he died. They died. They weren't able to support their family, even when they were out there in them streets fighting for freedom, justice, and equality for all people. Because remember, when Dr. Martin Luther King started the Poor People's Movement, that's when he became a threat. That's when he was considered a threat to society, because the Poor People movement included poor people, not just black people, because it wasn't just black people that were poor. There were white people that were poor and other people of different persuasion that were poor. Once he came out and said, we need to come together, which is what the Black Panther Party was doing as well, as I mentioned, Huey P. Newton, who was one of the founders of the Black Panther movement. Once they started trying to bring people together, not just black people, but all people who were suffering the same experience, then they became an imminent threat to the United States. Who's the United States and how is that threatening? But Malcolm X and Martin Luther King died poor. So it's not, you don't become a hero unless you die poor. Now, I don't know how the man made his money, but he did everything. He was of service just for, even up until his demise, up until his death. He still went around and was gracious, from the stories that I hear, and spoke out. He spoke out against y'all's current president. But that's what you worried about. And it sounded like a black man. You can tell by the voice, by the throat. It was a black man. And he called in to say, how did he get his wealth? You worried about how this man made his money. But you're hearing all of this greatness that he did along the way. Why he got to be poor in order for you to honor and respect him? Like, why? Who taught you to hate yourself? Who taught you this? So that really threw me off. That put a monkey wrench in it, and it just reminds us that those are the kind of people that we have in this world. I got people like that that'll be on my page. I'll be talking about one thing, and they'll claim they're not a part of. They don't know nothing about voting. They don't vote, but have an opinion about Democrats, not Republicans, not the independents, just Democrats. They want to dog out Democrats where the majority of black people vote. Like, who taught you to hate yourself? You know what I mean? That's the kind of the sad things we have to experience. Yeah, so y'all's president, he said what he had to say. And, a lot of people were just giving him props for actually saying something positive about a black man who was in a leadership role that, supported freedom, justice, and equality, and, was unapologetically black and pro-black. But, let me just see if I can pull up some of his, some of what he said about Jesse Jackson. Basically just calling him a good man, called him a friend. He said he was a friend. What else did this man say? He said, he said a lot of positive things about him. I'm just trying to get everything he said, but yeah, he said that, positive things, that he was, just that they, even though people considered him racist, he helped. Even though people considered him racist, this is what y'all's president said, he helped Jesse Jackson in many ways, and then threw in that he couldn't stand the former president, Barack Obama. If you guys don't know, Barack Obama and his wife came out and spoke as well and gave their condolences and said some positive things. So let me see what I have here. So according to number 47, what he had to say was basically, I said he called him a good man, a real hero during, he said, that he had grit, that he had street smarts. What the fuck you know about street smart? Anyway, whatever. Show orange ass. And it went on and on. But then, of course, he always has to make it about him. And then, of course, he threw in the fact that he said that Jesse Jackson couldn't stand Barack Obama. And, just what does that have to do with the price of eggs and milk? But the Obamas did post a statement. And Barack did say, Michelle and I were deeply saddened to hear about the passing of a true giant, the Reverend Jesse Jackson. It reads, for more than 60 years, Reverend Jackson helped lead some of the most significant movements for change in human history, from organizing boycotts and sit-ins to registering millions of voters to advocating for freedom and democracy around the world. He was relentless in his belief that we are all children of God, deserving of dignity and respect. He went on to say, Reverend Jackson also created opportunities for generations of African Americans and inspired countless more, including us. He said Michelle got her first glimpse of political organizing at the Jackson's kitchen table when she was a teenager, and in the two historic runs for president, He laid the foundation for my own campaign to the highest office of the land. Michelle and I will always be grateful for Jesse's lifetime of service and the friendship our families share. We stood on his shoulders. We send our deepest condolences to the Jackson family and everyone in Chicago and beyond who knew and loved him. Okay. You know, Barack Obama's going to be gracious. And then you got this little ghetto president. Ooh, ghetto president. Um, Speaking of races, I do want to touch on this before I get out of here. And again, I am wrapping it up, but I just got to vent because I've been watching The View, and our regular Alyssa is out. She had a baby, so they put in another Republican to sit in alongside who's my other girl? Yeah, y'all know her. There's another Republican there, and her name just leaves me because it's called brain fog. Um, but you guys know who I'm talking about if you watch The View. But anyway, Savannah, if you guys don't know, she is the daughter of the Chrisleys. If you remember the reality TV show Chrisley Knows Best, she ended up, having to take care of her kids who her parents were arrested. They went to jail for being charged with tax evasion. And so I don't remember the term of their sentence, but they only did 2.5 years until they were pardoned by the president when he became president again in last year or 2024. And so she was on The View hosting. She is a Fox News protege. She is definitely a plant. If you guys want to, you think about a MAGA person, I mean, it's across the board. It's like they all wear the same hat. They all say the same thing. And they are really, in fact, as their leader and Lord and Savior has praised them for being poorly educated. And so she really worked my nerves being on the show. But they were talking about some of the things that the current president had done. If you guys don't know, he took down a slavery presentation that talks about, the history of people who were enslaved. He had that taken down. The courts have since forced him to put it back up. Historically, he's done a lot of racist things, but her pushback in particular was to say it really bothers her when people call the president racist. And she said that I know for a fact he's not, because he saved my Black friend's life. So we know in the Black community, when we hear somebody say they Black friend, we know they racist off top, right? Because who labels their friends? I don't say my Mexican friend, my white friend. I just say my friend. If you're my friend, you're my friend. Why does race attached to it? And if you can count how many friends you got that are Black, that's another sign, indication that you're racist. And that just really triggered me. But they went in on her. But to me, they didn't eat. They didn't clock it. How the kids say, I don't know. That's clocking it. I don't know. But they didn't really eat. They didn't really drill into her. They mentioned the fact, they talked about the Central Park Five, how those 5 boys were accused of raping a white woman. If you guys don't remember, this president, he wasn't president at the time, but he put in this whole, he was just a so-called real estate mogul with 6 bankruptcies, and grabbing people by the poo nanny, put out his full-page ad in the New York Times calling for their death. This man who's against abortion, he's pro-life, calling for their death. Even after they were exonerated, he still said they still should be held accountable to this day. And so we consider that racist. Again, during his real estate career, he was actually, they brought up this, that he was actually sued for racial discrimination because he owned this high rise where he did not allow Black people to rent. And she was like, well, was that an accusation? Like, why the fuck you on here? Excuse me, y'all, but why are you even on this show if you don't even know? If you're going to defend a man, at least know his history. Yes, he was not only accused, but he was convicted. He was charged with racial discrimination for not allowing Black people to rent out his high rise. But speed it up. Let's just talk about right now immigration. And I'm just throwing this out for people who don't think that this man is racist, or you need to be able to give people points to think about that don't believe he's racist because they don't really pay attention. They just, believe they don't follow his story. They just make up their mind based on being poor education that they have. Right now, ask them this. If we had a Black president right now who was saying we're getting rid of all of the immigrants, and this Black president okayed ICE to go into Irish pubs, went to suburban areas, predominantly white communities, Anywhere where there was predominantly white people, and terrorize them and ask them for their papers and to prove that they were not immigrants because they're white. They look like immigrants. Would you think that was racist? Um, those are the kind of things you have to think about. Like, they don't consider those things. And these people that don't think that they're racist are the same people who they don't think the president is racist, sit and get their nails and hair done. They sit at Asian nail shops and get their nails done, but they're MAGA. They don't support immigrants. These are the same people who buy spices. You know where these spices come from? They're not from Europe. They come from countries and continents and islands where brown people were. These same people who say they're not racist eat a lot of ethnic foods. Okay. Even now, they're not agreeing to have Reverend Jackson lay in state at the Capitol, which is fine. And if you think he's not racist because he has Black people coming up and speaking about him during Black History Month, if y'all haven't paid attention to that, you got this whole Black History event where Black men and women came up, not talking about Black history, the excellence of what Black people have contributed to the world, but how great he is. And he's not Black.com. Tweet it. You'll find out. He's not Black. But yeah, so you don't think he's racist, but he's doing these kind of things. Remind them that many of the presidents that said that Black people were so awful and worthless and useless use them to build their wealth and actually raped them and made babies with them. Shout out to Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, 6 babies. So, was he racist? Was Thomas Jefferson racist? He had many slaves. He had many people who were enslaved, pardon me. And he was having regular sex with one of the enslaved girls at the age of 40-ish. And she was between the age of 14 and 16. And she gave him 6 babies. Was he racist? Was George Washington racist? Because he also had slaves. We talked about him, people who were enslaved, pardon me again. In more than, he had a lot. He had a lot of enslaved people. And Abraham Lincoln, they said he never had any enslaved people, but he was reportedly Black and did not support. They say, because we were taught that he freed the enslaved. And the reality is the enslaved freed themselves because they chose to fight and defend the United States while they was getting their ass whooped by the Confederates. But you don't see no statues up for them enslaved people. You see statues up for Confederacies and schools and bridges named for people who were literally those who were an imminent threat to the United States. They're being celebrated. They were being celebrated right now. Abraham Lincoln went on record during this time, during the Civil War, said, "I will not say that I am not nor have been in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of white and Black races, that I am not nor ever have been in favor of making voters or jurors of Negroes, nor of qualifying them to hold office, nor to intermarry with white people. And I will say in addition to this, that there is a physical difference between the white and Black races, which I believe will forever equally, I will forever forbid the two races living together on terms of social and political equality. I say upon this occasion, I do not perceive that because the white man is to have the superior position, the Negro should be denied everything." So all of that being said, because the last sentence, the Negro should not be denied everything, he's not racist either, right? You see what I'm saying? So, we were taught that this man freed the enslaved, and so he couldn't have been racist. But you just heard what he said. I just read it to you. He said that. That's his quote. I didn't make that up. He went on record with that. Meanwhile, y'all's president wants to get rid of Juneteenth. He dismantled DEI. They're trying to get rid of all of the civil rights. Voter suppression, again, is in full effect. And the civil rights and affirmative action. Okay. And was Hitler not a racist? I mean, can you be a racist if your mother's father was Jewish, but you go and slaughter the majority of the Jewish people in Europe? Was he a racist or not? Can he be a racist because he's Jewish too? Like, it's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah, that's what I wanted to get into. And I did that in less than 90 minutes. I had some clips I was going to play so you guys could actually hear his voice, Reverend Jesse Jackson. And this was a moving segment, moving speech that he made. And I want to play that before we get up out of here. For all of you guys who are listening, that took in any information and you found it fruitful and informative and educational, I appreciate you. So I'll go ahead and give you a clap, even though you didn't chat. Let me just go ahead and thank you all for listening and watching, and maybe chatting later, right? Maybe you'll chat later. And let me go ahead and applaud that. And then I want to get this clip on Jesse Jackson. He was at a Rainbow, it was in 1980s, late 80s. He was doing a Rainbow Coalition speech, and he was saying, charter to my head. And I just want to, these are the kind of leaders that we need in life. People who understand that they're human, that they're going to make mistakes, that they're not perfect, but their intentions is to do good and to be better, and to acknowledge that, something we're not seeing a lot of now under the kind of leadership that we have. So I want to just close out and play this. And then I got to go turn up. I'm going to put my boots on and I'm going to go have a good time. And I hope you guys do too. But yeah, so let me get this going.
Throughout this campaign, I've tried to offer leadership to the Democratic Party and the nation. If in my high moments I have done some good, offered some service, shed some light, healed some wounds, rekindled some hope, or stirred someone from apathy and indifference, or in any way along the way helped somebody, then this campaign has not been in vain. For friends who loved and cared for me, and for a God who spared me, and for a family who understood, I'm eternally grateful. If in my low moments, in word, deed, or attitude, through some error of temper, taste, or tone, I've caused anyone discomfort, created pain, or revived someone's fears, that was not my truest self. If there were occasions when my grape turned into a raisin and my drawbell lost its resonance, please forgive me. Charge it to my head and not to my heart.
He said, charge it to my head and not my heart. That's what we need in leadership roles. People with heart, with good intentions, not money hungry. You know what I mean? Power hungry. None of that. We need people with hearts and good intentions who focus on the people having the power, not those that we elect to lead us. The people have the power. Listen, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the weekend. Enjoy the weather. We got some funny acting weather out here. It's a little chilly. But anyways, I appreciate you hanging out with your girl. And I'll be back next week. And it's love and respect always. Bye-bye.